Hello, hello, hello. This is Two Nates on Sports. I'm Nathan Simmons. The person on the other end is Nathan Kwan. Let's start off with talking about the NFL, specifically the Dallas Cowboys, as they won their 11th straight game of the year in quite honestly their sloppiest performance so far. What was your thoughts on the game this Thursday?
Man, my thoughts were the Vikings offense and special teams just shot that defense in the foot. I mean, the defense was outstanding. They contained Elliott and Dak Prescott for the most part. They gave up the one big throw to Des Bryant, but I mean, for the most part, they were lights out. They held Dallas to 7 points through three quarters, and that punt, and then they fumbled the punt, and then until late, I mean, Sam Bradford was terrible, and that again, that offensive line just couldn't get anything going in the ground game, and I mean, Dallas's defense is again one of the biggest surprises this season, but just Minnesota on the offensive and side of the ball and their special teams, it's just you've got to feel for that defense because they pretty much played like the perfect game, and they came out short again.
Yeah, the Minnesota defense is basically the Sisyphus of the NFL right now. They just keep pushing the boulder up to the top of the mountain, and then it just rolls right back down to where they started, to basically 0.500. Definitely, I 100% give credit to that Minnesota defense. Daniel Hunter, he had two sacks this game. He's become one of the most dominant pass rushers in the league this year. Especially when you consider that he's a third-round pick and someone that the Cowboys could have gotten, but instead they got Randy Gregory, who can't play this year or probably next year because of marijuana. But yeah, just top down. Like I said last week, is the Minnesota Vikings defense is filled with playmakers from every position. But unfortunately, at the same time, I would point out that I kept waiting this entire game for the Cowboys offense to break this Vikings defense, and there seemed to be at points times where the Cowboys would be on the verge of breaking it, but like a horrible penalty by either like Gavin Escobar or someone else would completely stall the drive. And then again, kudos to the Vikings for being able to take advantage of it. But at the same time, the Cowboys, while they still have a good offense, they're not exactly built to constantly overcome first and 20s, first and 25s. But outside of that, I definitely the Cowboys defense has been very good at holding up for at least like the first three quarters, and then just sort of completely just slipping away in the fourth. Possibly just because they're better. The Cowboys, like the defense, like any other team, like any other defense, is better in short spurts than having to actually carry the team. That or basically make up for a poor performance from the offense. But outside of that, it was nice to see the Cowboys be able to overcome huge mistakes and still pull out a victory. That they don't have to play perfect. The offense does not have to be perfect in order to win the game. So that's my take. That's my takeaway from it. You?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a mark of a good team is you can win both like high scoring games like on Thanksgiving where against Washington it was more of a shootout going up and down the field, and then you can also win the low scoring games where you only get 13 first downs and you get outgained and outpossessed, but you still find a way to win. I mean, I think that shows a hallmark of a good team.
Yeah, for sure, definitely. But now let's go over to your side of I-45, I think, and talk about a very disappointing performance by Brock Osweiler, or I think you had a very interesting name for him earlier this week. If you wanted to touch on that.
G-rated, I don't think I can say that name. as far as the game itself, it was obviously very disappointing. The team just came out like really flat. Granted, San Diego, although they had a 4-6 record, you could say that they were in a lot of games this year, and they were really desperate because in the AFC West, with Kansas City, Oakland, Denver ahead of them, they pretty much have to win out. And so I think it started off. Brock Osweiler was first off was terrible again. He threw a first half interception where he was trying to throw the ball away. But I mean, Hopkins was long on the sideline, but he just kind of floated it up there. Casey Hayward picked it off. I thought the defense was actually the secondary didn't have the best game. I thought AJ Boye was burned a couple times, way too many penalties. Jadeveon Clowney jumped off sides like 3 times. Quentin Demps was turned inside out on a double move. So they fell behind. Combination of the offense being stuck in first gear and then the defense giving up the big plays. I do think the play calling from Bill O'Brien has been strange this year. They had a 2nd and goal, and they ran Braxton Miller, who's your, I guess, slot receiver. And I thought Lamar Miller fumbled, and I mean the running game really couldn't get going that much. The defense, again, I thought they stuffed Melvin Gordon pretty well, but they just gave up too many big plays in the passing game. And then Osweiler, when we were trying to come back, it was just that the second interception was he overthrew the tight end by like 20 yards, and I'm not exaggerating on that. That throw was terrible.
Yeah. It went directly to the San Diego Chargers player.
Yeah.
It would have been a great pass if that's what he wanted to do, but I don't think that's what he wanted to do.
Yeah, I mean, he mentioned post game that like it was the right read, and I think the guy was open. I mean, but you gotta put it somewhere in the correct zip code. I mean, I think us Texans fans are we're amazed that like we Brian Hoyer last year, like despite how bad he was, like in the regular season, he put up like really good numbers. He had 20 touchdowns and 6 interceptions. And when we've spent $39 million guaranteed on Osweiler, we didn't expect anything like this.
Yeah.
It's just really they're kind of stuck because you gave him all that money. You don't really have much behind him. You have Tom Savage, who's like a mid-round pick of a couple of years ago, but I mean, in his limited action, he hasn't really shown much. And you have all this money invested in Osweiler, so you probably stuck with him for the rest of this year, maybe even next year, given the money that's guaranteed him. And I mean, you just gotta hope that at some point he turns it around. I think this week against the Green Bay defense that's 21st against the pass, I think there's an opportunity there, especially against the Green Bay defense is actually pretty decent against the running game. So I think Osweiler is going to have to make plays in the passing game, especially not make mistakes, because I think the interceptions this year have just plagued him. Like every time he has a sort of decent game, it seems like the next game he's turning the ball over 2 or 3 times. And it stifles drives continuously giving the ball to the other team.
Yeah. No, he's been like, whenever it seems like he's about to turn a corner, he then just completely drops the ball and throws basically it has a 3 interception game. If I were going into this Green Bay game, I honestly, I think the best that they have to play to their strengths, and their strengths are both defense and Lamar Miller and their wide receivers. Like literally, Osweiler is the weak link in this team. And what they really need to do is just be handing the ball off to Lamar Miller, eat up the clock, and then when necessary, maybe just throw some short passes to Hopkins or Will Fuller, or even Braxton Miller, and have them try to make plays after the catch. I think. I mean, I think that's what they got to do, and then just try to limit the responsibility that Osweiler has for this team to get a win. if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think it's not only just Osweiler. I will say the offensive line has not been that good this year. I mean, they've been good in the running game, but as far as pass protection, they've left a lot to be desired there. I think Dwayne Brown, the left tackle, who's been your Pro Bowler, he hasn't had a good season. You lost Derek, your right tackle, to a knee injury earlier, and so Chris Clark is in there filling in, and he's been a career backup. So I think there's problems up front as well, and then also the receivers for the most part actually have not been. They showed last week San Diego, their secondary actually had a really good game, and they were showing the wide angle where the receivers just weren't getting open. So you have Hopkins who's a great possession receiver. Like he can make one-handed catches, he can run all the routes, but he's not exactly a speed demon.
Yeah,
he can't really get away from like corners that play really tight coverage on him. And then also I think you have the youth in Braxton Miller and Will Fuller who are just it's their first year as receivers in the NFL, really learning how to run routes and beat a man-to-man coverage. I think the tight ends have been good for the most part, and especially after last year when we barely threw the ball at all to the tight ends. I think C.J. Fedorowicz has had a pretty good season, and of course you have Lamar Miller catching the ball out of the backfield to an extent. But at some point you do have to throw the ball down the field, and I think this is the week. Granted, the conditions in Green Bay aren't the best. It's snowing there, but you got to take some shots on this Green Bay defense.
Yeah, I think Houston is able to pull out the win this time. I think they're going to be a lot more focused going in. I know last week I said that I think the Texans will make, even though I did say that there's a pretty good chance that they lose to the Chargers. I still think they have a good shot of making it to 9-7 and winning the AFC South. And I still believe that to some extent, but at the same time, I'm definitely less sure of it this week than I was last week, especially with the way that the Titans have been able to play this year, although they barely squeaked out a win against a very weak Chicago Bears team that was starting their practice squad wide receivers and their third string quarterback.
Hey, how many touchdowns can you drop clear touchdown?
Yeah, that must have been it. I mean, at least within the last minute too, was just crazy. And I think I might have lost you there. Are you still there?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. No, they dropped 3 touchdowns within the last minute. And it was just completely absurd. The Titans got very lucky to win that game.
For sure.
Right. So I guess now we can. Do I have anything else to say about the NFL, or do you want to just move on to the NBA?
Yeah, let's move on.
Cool. So NBA has been a very good week for the Rockets. Do you want to? I guess do you have a lot to say about that?
Yeah, sure. So the biggest win, they just finished a 5-game road trip. They went 4-1 on the road trip, including wins in Sacramento, Portland, Denver, and of course the biggest one was Thursday night against Golden State, snapping their 12-game winning streak, beating them 132-127 in double overtime. And I think, so far this year, it's just been amazing to watch the offense and how they can just blister you with 3-pointers. I think after last year, most of the fan base, I'd say, wanted more of a defensive coach, and I think they went the exact opposite. They hired Mike D'Antoni, and they also, Daryl Morey, the GM, surrounded James Harden with just a bunch of shooters. Eric Gordon, Ryan Anderson. And I think that's shown, I think this year it's just they're 13-7 through 20 games. They've only played 6 of their 20 home games at home. And I think Thursday night, that was sensational. I will say, granted, Klay Thompson and Steph Curry were way off. I don't think you're going to see a shooting performance from them.
Yeah.
I think big shot after big shot from Ryan Anderson, Eric Gordon. And of course, James Harden's been playing like an MVP candidate. Most would say he's second to Russell Westbrook right now, but and then I would say even more impressive than that, pulling out that big win on Thursday night, was coming back the next day in altitude in Denver and then clobbering the Nuggets. Granted, Denver's a terrible team, but I think that's very impressive, back-to-back, double overtime, then going into altitude and pulling out another win. I will say it was interesting. Development on Thursday night was Draymond Green kicking James Harden in double overtime.
Which in the head.
Kind of cost them the game. They called a flagrant one, and he kind of went off on a rant about, contortions of the body and how the NBA needs to study kinesiology. And then last night he goes out and kicks the Phoenix Sun. And so I just think, like I play basketball. Like, you can certainly flail around. I think his game he's undersized, and I think there's merit to saying that he's not trying to kick people. He's just like flailing his arms, his limbs around, and like somehow his leg just goes up all the time. But this is a correctable behavior. I mean, at some point when you're costing your team by getting suspended in Game 6 of the finals, and you're costing your team in the second overtime when it's like a tight game, and basically that call widened the margin. Like, you need to change something about your game. I don't know.
Yeah, and that's the thing with Draymond too, is just that, like, while I do think he's not trying to do this on purpose, he just doesn't care. And I think that's just as damaging as if he were actually. Well, I wouldn't say that it's necessarily as damaging as if he were like doing it on purpose, and just like doing like roundhouse kicks to James Harden. I mean, the fact that he just doesn't care is pretty damning about who he thinks he is as a player, and whether or not he thinks he should be like getting away with it just because he's already won a championship and I will say this, he's a star. He's a star in the NBA, and he could very easily be like the guy on any other team. But at the same time, like, I will say this, the Rockets have definitely been a big surprise this year. Especially considering how the coach that they got, and all the players and personnel, and how everything's basically broken the exact right way in the way that Morey was hoping. And again, like you said, Harden and Westbrook are right now are trading back and forth the top spot in the MVP race. Which, I mean, not to open up old wounds, but just think about like how many championships the Thunder could have had by now had they kept Harden and had Durant for the past 4 years. But yeah, no, the Rockets have been very good. Hopefully they can continue it. I mean, the big problem with the Phoenix Suns, which was the team that D'Antoni basically road to sort of has been sort of like basing his career off of ever since. The problem with the Suns were that once it came time for the playoffs, they didn't have a strong enough defensive identity that they could rely on that game after game in short series. But we'll see. I mean, definitely, I would say enjoy it. The Golden State Warriors. In all fairness, I will say that Clay and Steph it's Steph Curry, not Seth Curry. Seth Curry's on a different team that we'll talk about in a bit. But Clay and Steph have definitely been off have been very inconsistent this season so far, especially compared to the last 2 to 3. And right now, Durant is carrying that team. And one could argue that he also should be considered at the top, at the top of the MVP race so far. And again, just to really stick it to the Oklahoma City Thunder, really. But yeah, this the Rockets right now, I think they might be able to get if things continue as they are, they might be able to get a 5th or 6th seed in the playoffs. So, but it's a long ways away.
Yeah, and I think part of what the Rockets and certainly the defense is a question mark for the playoffs because we've never really seen a team that's given up 106, 108 points a game win a championship. But also on the Golden State side, they have some problems of their own where they're like an amazing offensive team, but they have question marks defensively as well, especially inside where they lost Andrew Bogut. They lost they lost a lot on the interior, and so they have JaVale McGee and Zaza Pachulia and David West right now. But those are just you could say veterans that are on the decline, and so we'll see if they make a move to get a bigger defensive presence on the inside. Because right now they're kind of like the Rockets; they're just outscoring teams, and they're not really caring on what's happening on the defensive side of the ball.
For sure, yeah, definitely. They basically got like all the people that played center last year for the Mavs, and they basically did a 3-for-1 trade and trading like David Lee, JaVale McGee, and Zaza Pachulia, getting those three and giving away Andrew Bogut to the Mavs. Although, yeah, to now like switch gears and talk about the Mavs. Bogut hasn't exactly been the season savior that we were hoping for, but he did have a very good game, as well as Dwight Powell, Harrison Barnes, as well as Wesley Matthews, all three, as well as Dwight Feeney or Smith Feeney. I can't remember his name. There's a lot of names going on with that guy. They all had a pretty good game last night against the Chicago Bulls, who just came off a stunning victory against the Cavs. So that was the only win. I believe that was the only win they had all week. And hopefully this doesn't hurt their chances to get the number 1 seed in the upcoming NBA draft. But this Mavs team is playing with a lot of heart. Let's just put it that way. They're playing with a lot of heart and not much else. Wesley Matthews has actually, in all fairness, Wesley Matthews has been finally turned his game around. It looks like he's getting back into at least somewhat of a form that he had with the Portland Trail Blazers prior to the horrific knee injury that he had. But right now the team is just Harrison Barnes, Wesley Matthews, and not much else. But yeah, do you have any thoughts on the Mavs outside of just like how terrible they are, or just yeah?
Nope. I will say the interesting comments this week from Steve Kerr, who was talking about medical marijuana and for injuries and he in the NBA, and Mark Cuban had some comments on that, saying that basically you can get an exception to the rule for using it for for medical reasons, and that like you should be able to use that in professional sports as well. So I was wondering, your thoughts on that.
I think that would be great, honestly. I'm one of those people that's for medical marijuana. That's for like legalizing marijuana in general. Especially, like alcohol is while I wouldn't say like I'm a doctor that knows specifics about it, about each one and their effects. If we're gonna have like alcohol be like promoted at every game, and like marijuana is at its worst just as dangerous as it's just as bad as alcohol in some sense. Yeah, like one's legal, the other one's illegal. I do agree with both. That the especially in the NBA, where it's not necessarily as physically while I wouldn't say it's not well. it's not as physical a game as football is. It's still it it still does require a certain. I don't know where I'm going with this. I apologize. I lost my train of thought. But basically, yes,
It's
I think the NBA should allow for marijuana. Allow for marijuana and just in general, honestly. I mean, so long as they like teams can have like specific guidelines for like whether or not their players should be doing it. But I think in general it should be allowed.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting is I think the NBA, if you compare it to the NFL, is a pretty progressive league in terms of how the standards of how it runs. You think about what Adam Silver did to the Clippers owner, and basically saying that it's no tolerance for that, zero tolerance. And I think the NBA, for the most part, I think if uh, if this does get, this conversation gets opened up, and I think they would be the league that would implement some sort of regulation, allow this. I think the NFL might learn something from this, but I guess that's down
For
the road.
sure.
We'll see what happens. I will say that was an interesting tidbit that came up this week, especially with the Warriors. So
Yeah.
moving on, let's talk about the Texas Longhorns. So Tom Herman, the new head football coach, I believe got his salary approved by the Regents yesterday. Um,
Hmm.
he had his opening press conference last Sunday. I guess, do you have any initial thoughts from the presser?
Um. I was impressed with specifically the comments that he said that he told the players right before going into the press conference. I feel from what he said that he paid respect to Charlie Strong, who the players still absolutely love and do wish he was still there. He paid his due respect to the work that Strong did, while also saying that they need to be held to a higher standard going forward, and just in general, the way that he talked about how that Texas should be considered the premier, one of the most, not only the premier team in the state of Texas, but uh, one of uh, one of the premier programs in the entire in the entire country. He definitely has shows a lot of confidence and a lot of ambition. And while I still do have some reservations with the way Charlie Strong's departure was handled. I think that Herman is up to the task of leading this team forward and being able uh, to work out the transition from uh, the past coach to the present day. What were your thoughts?
Yeah. So my biggest thing that I took away was the confidence and the um, just the way he carried out himself. He seems like he really has a vision and a plan for Texas football. And that's not saying that Charlie Strong did not, but
Mhm.
I think the way it was all handled, I think left a lot to be desired. But I think bottom line, I think Tom Herman is Charlie was loved by his players, but I would say Tom Herman players back at Houston that he left. I mean, he was really respected and loved by them too. I mean, some of them came out and wished on Twitter publicly that we wish Tom Herman the best. Like he was like a father to me here at Houston.
Mm.
Go Cougs, and I think I mean, oftentimes when you have coaches that leave, you don't have that sort of respect and like um, those kind of warm wishes from the side that had their coach leave, and I think
Yeah.
that shows, I guess, the kind of person that Tom Herman is, and what he influenced on the kids at Houston. I will say I think this whole coaching thing I still think it's kind of ridiculous how coaches can just get up and leave whenever they want, and players have to sit out a year.
Yeah, no, that's some harsh stuff, especially like, and again, this is also like NCAA still is very hypocritical on that issue, because they can hand out sanctions on a program that in which a coach can escape it, but the players have to sit out a year, and that like players that have like aspirations to play in the NFL and uh, basically want to make that their career, can basically have their job prospects negatively affected without any sort of sense of recourse. Um, I think is definitely it's definitely something that I think the NCAA really should consider fixing going forward.
Yeah. So I guess talking briefly about the playoff, which I guess the final rankings will be announced within the next half an hour or so. But
Mm-hmm.
it looks like from from the I guess the rumors that have coming out is that the top four from last week are going to be in. You have Alabama, who won the SEC, Clemson, who won the ACC, Washington, which won the Pac-12, and Ohio State, which did not win the Big Ten, but
Yeah.
based on, I guess, their strength of schedule, their quality wins, they're going to get in over Penn State. So I guess I do think it's very interesting, the playoff committee, I guess, this year going with Ohio State, which didn't win their conference championship, when I guess their whole thing was, how much conference championships matter the last couple of years, especially when Baylor and TCU got both double snubbed a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
The Big 12 to kind of put this conference championship game back in, and really, I mean, it didn't matter this year for the Big Ten.
Yeah. Well, and also, in all fairness, like, I mean, if you look at the record, I mean, technically Ohio State only had like one loss, and it was a close loss to Penn State, and Penn State technically had two losses. So in that sense, I guess it makes sense. It's understandable. But at the same time, it shows the lack of consistency, kind of going forward. And it's just sort of like, you wish that there would be it would be better, it would be more representative of what actually happened in the season. But I mean, at the same time, it makes sense, and it's somewhat fair, I would say. I If I had to guess the specific like top four rankings going in, I think it would be Alabama, Ohio State, Washington. I think jumps over Clemson just because of the nature of how they won their conference game, in which they completely clobbered Colorado. And Colorado was a top 10 team going in, while Penn State, while they played great yesterday, they still only won by one touchdown. So, wait, I meant Clemson. Clemson also only won by one touchdown against a top 25 yet not top 10 team. They probably moved back one spot to the number 4, but I think basically how it was going into there's really nothing that changed too drastically this going into the weekend.
Yeah, so they actually just announced it within the past 5 minutes. So it looks like
Oh wow.
Alabama's going to be playing Washington so Washington gets the number 4 seed. They're they're going to play in the Peach Bowl, and Clemson will be number 2. They jump Ohio State, but I guess it doesn't
really.
So Clemson
Wow.
to wear orange uniforms, I guess. Against Ohio State in the Fiesta Bowl. So I mean, I guess the last thing, I guess, is just the committee says it's one of their protocol that says conference championships and head-to-head should be used to separate teams with similar resumes. And I guess,
yeah,
by just playing devil's advocate for Penn State, they won their conference championship and they beat Ohio State head-to-head, but they won't be in the playoff.
Mm-hmm.
And so
No, yeah, they'll.
I guess the chairman said that the margin between them wasn't that close, which I'm not sure about that. But I think what happens eventually is I think they go to 8, and I think you're gonna have all this debate. I mean, before it was like top 2, number 3, number 4 are gonna gripe. Now it's top 4, number 5, number 6 gonna gripe. I think eventually it's gonna go to 8, but we'll see how long that takes.
Yeah, no, it'll be interesting how they go forward and whether or not they expand it. I think expansion is probably going to be on the horizon on that one, just for at least like maybe like just 2 extra games. But we'll see for sure. Anything else you want to add, or do you want to just like move on to touch on at least Shaka, or just also touch on a very specific MLB signing?
Yeah. Well, we can talk about Shaka briefly. I guess the Texas Longhorns basketball team has gotten off to kind of a slow start. They started off 3-0, then they lost 3 games in a row. Got back on track with a win over Alabama on Friday night. But I to be honest, I haven't really followed them that much this year. But it seems like a lot of growing pains for a lot of the youngsters on that team.
Yes, no, 100% agreed. Although I will add this, Eric Davis, he seems like a great guy, and I think he will turn it around later this year. He's definitely. It seems like he's definitely regressed from where he was last year. Last year he seemed to have this like poise and very like ice cold and like very 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 poised shooter. But now he can't even hit like 2-pointers on a consistent basis. And it's just I don't know what's happened with him. Hopefully he's able to turn it around later on, but he's definitely regressed. But on the flip side, Tevin Mack has turned into the go-to 3-point shooter. Curran Roach has turned around and has shown he can handle primary ball handler, be the primary ball handler on the team. As well as I've been very impressed with Jared Allen, and I think a lot of the young guys going in, specifically Young and Andrew Jones, that they're showing promise. But right now, this is just a young team that's still trying to figure things out going forward.
Yeah.
But yeah,
3-point shooting. I mean, I was looking at the box score for the loss to UT Arlington, which, by the way, should never ever happen.
It's understandable though, because the UT Arlington team is like filled with seniors, and so it's like experience is a lot more important at the beginning of a season than towards the end.
Yeah, and so I guess finally, how scared of the Houston Astros are you as a Texas Rangers fan?
Very now that they got Carlos Beltran, like gosh, I mean like you guys are going to be really hopefully more than likely you guys should be pretty happy with getting Carlos Beltran. Like he was our number 3 hitter going into the playoffs before we got spanked by the Blue Jays. But yeah, no, I mean he's still, the guy's still got it. You guys are reuniting with him after that one, like, was it half a season or just like 1 year that you had Carlos?
04.
Yeah.
And
04, yeah, and what? Go ahead.
And we've done nothing but boo him every time he's come back because I think we felt as a fan base a little betrayed by what we offered him, and I guess the feeling was he just left for more money with the Mets. He wasn't trying to win. The Mets were not a very good team.
Yeah.
And the most they accomplished while he was there was him looking at strike 3 in the NLCS.
NLCS, yeah. Well, so I mean, technically, I guess it's still. I mean, that's still pretty close, and it looked like he thought he would have a chance at winning. But yeah, no, I like looking back on that team that the Astros had when they were able to make it to the World Series. I mean, you had Andy Pettitte, Roger Clemens, Roy Oswalt. You had a much more solid rotation, as well as like you still had the remnants of the 3Bs, although they were kind of getting up there in age. But yeah, like had he stayed, they could have had the 4Bs, and I don't know. I don't know what marketing you could have done with that, but it sounds like there's something there. Yeah.
I mean, it ended up working out. They went to the World Series the year after that.
Yeah. Oh, I got completely confused on that one. All apologies.
Yeah, I mean the Astros went to the World Series in '05 against the White Sox, got swept, and certainly I think his bat would have helped in that series. But
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
and I guess it'll be interesting to see how we play it because you have kind of a lot of outfielders. Beltran could be a DH as well, but then you have Evan Gaddis, who was your DH last year, who did a lot of catching, but you don't expect
Just traded for Brian McCann.
get bats from Brian McCann. And so I think AJ Hinch has a bunch of pieces to play with, and I think it's exciting. It's better to have more talent than not, and we'll see if it's all together. A lot of I do think there's still a need for starting pitching, although it seems that there's a report that said that there's unlikely to be any bigger moves the rest of this offseason. So the rumors on Chris Sale, I don't think that will come through. But hopefully, if you get a bounce back season from Dallas Keuchel and you have Lance McCullers who's fully healthy, I think those are two guys that can instantly boost your starting rotation. And your bullpen was one of the best in the majors last year, and so hopefully, if you have more consistency from the back end of that bullpen, I think. I mean, Astros just got to figure out a way to beat the Rangers, and
yeah, and maybe Carlos Beltran has like behind the scenes secrets that he can teach to everyone. So
yeah, so we'll see how it shakes out. I think that wraps it up for this week. You have anything else to add?
what going back to the Cowboys, even though they did pretty well at like Dan Bradford, again the pass rush is still not really there. They were only able to get like 3 sacks. I think going into next, I think like obviously not to look too far ahead into the future. I think next year they'll try trading for Sheldon Richardson. Probably give like maybe the third or fourth round pick for him, especially since he's had some off the field troubles, but he still has the potential to be a completely dominant pass rusher, and I think he just needs a change of scenery, especially to get out from the crowded defensive line over there with the New York Jets. And I think we'll definitely be drafting quite a few edge rushers. I think Charles Harris is on the Cowboys' radar and should be available towards the end of the first round. Again, not to count our chickens before they hatch, but more than likely that's where the Cowboys should be drafting. So I think they'll be doing that, as well as trading Tony Romo and probably Doug Free. I think both could go to the Denver Broncos, and they'd be able to get their first round pick in exchange, and probably draft 2 of those. And then I think, assuming that the Green Bay Packers are unable to make the playoffs this year and / also not win the Super Bowl, I think Julius Peppers gives it one more crack, and he goes to the Cowboys in the hopes that he's able to put them over the top and will finally win that Super Bowl that he's always wanted. But yeah, I think that right now they need to invest as much as they can on the pass rush going into next year. But yeah, outside of that, and also congratulations to Western Michigan. They're now going to the Cotton Bowl, and I don't know who they're going to play, but like congratulations on finishing undefeated.
Yeah, and happy birthday to you.
Oh, thank you.
Your birthday a couple days ago. I guess
Yeah.
Cowboys got you in for your birthday. Not bad.
Yeah, no, it was a nice early birthday present for sure.
Yeah. All right. Well, I guess I'll talk to you next week.
Yeah. Talk to you then.
All right. See ya.
Have a good day. Bye.